Okay, so let's say that you have been using Google Sheets for a while and you are tired of just having text in boxes and you want to bring your spreadsheets to life. Today, we are going to cover how to help you do that by using some basic functions to take your spreadsheets to the next level. Let's start with math. There are a lot of mathematical operations that you can do in Google Sheets, but we are going to cover just the basic ones, such as addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and exponents. For each of these, there are two ways you can do them. The basic symbols, like you might have learned in school, and the formulas. And I'm going to cover for each why you might want to use one or the other. Let's start with addition. So I have this total column here, which is looking quite empty. I want to add how much each person made altogether for each day. So we can either do this using the um, basic method, which is equals, which tells Google Sheets that you want to do a formula instead of just text. And we can do point and click, B3 plus C3 plus D3, hit enter. Before we do, actually, this box will show you a preview of what will happen when you hit enter. So this lets you see what your results will be as you are working on your formula. So let's go ahead and hit enter, and you can see that indeed this is 1375. And if we grab this little blue square at the bottom right and drag it down, you can see it automatically updates for each of our rows. And the good news is that it ignores this blank spot and only adds together these two numbers and doesn't throw an error. The bad news is if this was text, like say on vacation instead of a number, this breaks because it doesn't know how to add text to two numbers. This is where the formulas come in handy because if we do the formulas instead of the um, A plus B plus C, and let's click and drag, which is another benefit of using the formula. We can do a range, close this, hit enter, and let's drag this down. And once we do, you'll see this error goes away because the formula knows how to ignore this text, whereas just doing um, B6 plus C6 plus D6 does not know how to ignore the text. Let's get rid of this again. The same works with subtraction, where we can either do equals, let's say C4 minus B4, and you can see we get 200, or we can do equals minus, open a parenthesis, and do C4, comma, instead of minus, and then B4. Close our parenthesis, hit enter, and you see we get the same result. Now this also works for multiplication, where we do equals B5 times C5, or we can do equals multiply B5 comma C5 and get the same result. Now I'm not going to do it for divide and exponent because it's more of the same and you can see both of the ways you can do it right here. But let's say we want to do an average instead of just the basic math operations. Getting a bit more advanced here, we'll type in equals, and you can see Google is smart enough to realize that this is a row where we have average at the front of the row, so we want average. And because we have a column full of numbers on top of this, we want to average this column full of numbers. Why don't we click on this and hit enter, and you can see we've got an average of $529. So in this case, because this is blank and doesn't have a number in it, it skips it and doesn't make it part of the average. If we typed a 0 and hit enter, you would see the average drops pretty significantly because now we're dividing by 5 instead of by 4. That's something to keep in mind if you want to um, average all of the rows, you might want to make sure there are numbers in all of them because otherwise they'll be skipped. Um, and once again, we can click the square and drag over, and you can see it does the averages for Jane and Robert without us having to type anything in. Now, let's say we didn't want to do any math on the numbers. We just want to figure out how many days there are in this report without having to count them ourselves. This is where count and count A come in handy. And we will cover what the difference is and when you might want to use one versus the other. Let's go here and do count first. Equals count, open parenthesis, and I will click and drag and close our parenthesis, hit enter, and you can see 5, even though we highlighted 6 cells. This is because it only counts numbers and dates, and this is text, so it doesn't get counted. By contrast, if we use count A, which counts everything, you see click and drag, close and enter, and we have 6 instead of 5. So depending on what you want to do, one or the other will be more useful. In this case, count is what we want, but if you just wanted to count how many rows there were, count A would be much better because it counts the text too. Let's move on to some things that you can do with text. So let's say here I have add and subtract, and I want to figure out what the formulas are for each of these. And I have the answers here, but I want to reference them over in this cell. In this case, VLOOKUP is a great formula, and honestly, it's probably the one that I use most in Google Sheets and Excel both. So let's type in equals VLOOKUP, open our parenthesis, and you can see we have a few things that we need to give the function. Our search key is going to be the text that we're looking for. It's going to be referenced against the leftmost column in our range, which we're going to select now. So for range, we're just going to highlight and drag. And the search key is going to be compared against column G because that's the leftmost column that we highlighted. There's no way, unfortunately, to make it like look in the middle and then grab something from the left. You just have to make sure that what you're looking for is all the way on the left side, and anything you want to pull over to this cell is somewhere to the right of it. So let's do a comma, and our index is the cell that we want to return. So I'm looking for the formula, so that's going to be 1, 2, 3. I'll type in 3 here. Now, this is optional, this is sorted, but since we don't have a sorted list here that's like alphabetically sorted or sorted lowest to highest numerically, I'm going to type in false so it doesn't give us bad data. You can see here the preview looks good, and when I hit enter, it's done properly. Now, if I click and drag this, it gives me the right answer, but you see something interesting here that since we drug it down, instead of going from G3 to I7, it's going from G4 to I8. In this case, what we want to do to make sure we're using the same range is put dollar signs in front of the G, in front of the 3, in front of the I, and in front of the 7. This makes it a hard reference. So you see when we go down, instead of being incremented, we're using the same letters and numbers, um, and we don't have to adjust things manually. Now, if we go into a bit more depth with the things we can do with text, we can do search and replace. But to do search and replace automatically, we might want to get some more basic information first. So we're going to start with length. In some circumstances, you want to find out how long a bit of text in a cell is. So we can use len, open a parenthesis, click on the cell, and you can see this is 5 characters. Or in this case, I think we want to do Robert's name instead. And Robert is 6 characters. So search tells us where something is in a cell. So let's take a look at this. Equals search, open a parenthesis. Let's bring down our help box. You can see we're looking for Frank. Um, the text to search is, again, this box. And starting at we don't have to do because it's optional. You can see Frank is starting at character 1. Is not too useful in this case, but when you're trying to use the replace function, which we're going to cover now, it is invaluable. So let's type in equals replace. And Robert doesn't like to run anymore, so we're going to put Frank in his place because Frank likes to run. So the text we're going to use for this is Robert likes to run. This is our base text, and we're going to replace Robert with Frank using this formula. So we hit comma. The position we don't know, so we're going to use the search function. So in this case, we're going to type search, open our parenthesis. We're going to search for Robert, comma. We're going to search in this text, and we're starting at 1, so we don't need to fill that in. And that does it for the position. Search will give us the position as you can see here. Now we want the length, and we don't want to count manually, so what we're going to use is the ling formula. We type it in, we click on Robert because we want to know how many characters Robert's name turns out to be. That will be how many characters we want to replace out of this cell. We hit comma, and we want to replace it with Frank. Close this, and you can see Frank likes to run without having to do any counting, any searching where we have to do, let's see, Robert starts at 1, 2, 3, and we don't have to figure out the length of the text. This is probably the best way to do replace if you don't want to get into the more advanced formulas. Now, if you want some extra credit, we can also do regex replace, which is easier because there's no searching and there's no length finding. We just do the text, and then we can hit comma, and then we can type in, we want to search for Robert, or let's do a wild card, right? His name is either Rob or Robert, and we're not sure which, so we can type in dot star, and that'll act as our wild card. And then we hit comma, and then we can just search for Frank, and that does not exactly what we're expecting. So let's take a look at why this didn't work. Text, regular expression, replacement. In this case, the wildcard matched too much. So you can see here, if we put a T here, then we so Frank likes to run. Moving on, we can also use the if formula to make our spreadsheet do some basic thinking. So let's say we want to evaluate John's performance. We know he took vacation, so we want to see if he's still keeping up or if he is slacking off or not. So in this case, we do if our logical expression, which is the condition we want to meet. So in this case, we do if this cell is greater than 500, then we do a comma, and if it is, then we do John did good. We do a comma, and if it isn't, then we do John needs some work. And then we can close this, and you see John did good. Now, if you want to do more than one calculation before we decide which one of these to put, instead, what we can do is we can use the and and or operations. Now, what these are going to do is um, if we use and, we can do more than one. Let's see, and open equals and open. Logical expression 1 is going to be B8 is greater than 500. 2 is going to be C8 is greater than 500. 3 is going to be D8 is greater than 500. And you can see because they're all true, then this evaluates out to true. If one of them isn't true, then it becomes false. So if we wanted to know whether the entire team did good, what we could do is take this and drop it into our if function. Whoops. Take this, if, and then we just paste it here in our logical expression box, comma, value if true, the team did good, and if false, the team did bad. And you can see in this case, the team did good, but if any one of them falls behind, then you see the team suddenly is doing bad, even though the other two are still doing good. And when we remove this, you can see they automatically change back. Now, or, if we use or instead of and, um, we only have to do one of these to get a true. So in this case, if we switch this to or, it still gives the same by appearances, but if we do the same thing that caused the team to do bad before, you can see the team's still doing good, but John needs some work because as long as one of the three team members is matching our criteria here, it will still give us true and it will use this value instead of this value. Now, if you wanted to switch things, like you're looking for um, the opposite of something, what you can use is not, and because the or function is evaluating to true, not turns it around. So let's say, looking at this in more detail, if B8 is greater than 500, you can see this is not true. It evaluates to false. But if we use not, it just turns this around and we get true instead. So this can be useful sometimes when you want to use a function and you just need the opposite of something that you're looking for. Um, let's move on to the next item. Uh, so we are going back to text operations for this. Um, and we are going to do the final two formulas that we're looking at. So this text is pretty nice, but it's not loud enough. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn this to all uppercase. So you can see here we do equals upper, which is our next function, and we are going to turn this into uppercase. So you can see here we are very angry and we're yelling that John needs some work because he is seriously slacking. Now, the team did bad here because we still have the not here, but we're going to do this much more quietly because if the entire team does bad, that sort of reflects badly on us. So we're going to make this all lowercase. And we're going to do equals, lower, open our parenthesis. We're going to do this text, close our parenthesis, hit enter, and you can see this turns it to all lowercase. Um, and sometimes you want to work with case sensitive things. So let's say instead of search, we're using find, which is a case sensitive function. In this case, if we're searching for Frank in all lowercase, the text to search is this one. You can see it doesn't find anything because this is lowercase and this is not lowercase. But if we take the text to search and we use lower on it, then you can see it finds it no problem, because the lowercase function here turns this field all lower for this function. Now, the nice thing about the search, going back to that for a bit, is that search is case insensitive, so it doesn't matter whether it's uppercase or lowercase. But sometimes you won't have a function that you can make case insensitive, so being able to make everything upper or everything lower can really help you out depending on what function you're working with. Now, that's everything we're going to cover today. Um, for some extra credit, you can see we have a line chart here. If you want to figure out how to make this line chart, there's going to be a card in the upper right hand corner that covers how to make line charts and some other type of charts. Go ahead and check that out. Otherwise, if this helped you, subscribe and stay tuned for more Google Sheets and Excel tips and tricks. Thank you.